Hi, this is going to be my video tutorial to Counter-Strike CSS Cannon, a video I uploaded onto YouTube, and the link to that is in the description. So what I've done, I've opened up Hammer Editor here and put all the entities in together and got it all working, and I'm going to give you a quick run through on what I've done in order to get the result you saw earlier if you've watched the video. So you've got your simple player spawn here, there's a terrorist, and on the other side, just so you've got some target practice, is a counter-terrorist. The main entity here is going to be your game player equip, which allows you to pick up this knife, which we've got all the custom content attached to, instead of already spawning with a knife, which you obviously can't drop if you know the game Counter-Strike. So we've got our knife in here, and we've given it a name. I'm just going to run through all the properties on all the entities that we've put in so that it all works together. So we've obviously got to give it a name so we know what everything else speaks to and gets parented to. Name's knife, and the flags are start constraint. That stops it from rolling on the floor and keeps all this stuff in the right place when you begin the level. Okay, we've got a small invisible button which the player can't see and can't shoot, and that will move around with the player as well, so whenever they press E it will fire the cannons and you've got your result. That doesn't need a name, but obviously the parent, just in case you don't know, parent is basically like attaching something to something else. So say your keyboard was parented to your mouse on your desk. Every time you moved your mouse in rotation, movement like that, the keyboard would follow and probably cause chaos and crash your screens. Disable receiving shadows is on yes, just keep it efficient really, there's no need for it to be there. And the delay before reset is on 1, so you can fire the cannon every 1 second. And we've got flags don't move, which is just simple, and use activates. So every time you shoot it, you don't end up firing the cannon as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the cannons now, and the parent, again, knife. The world monitor is cannon_gun. If you want to go into your browser and just type in cannon, it'll be up there, and you can select that. Disable shadows again, yes, just keep it efficient. And collisions is important, you want that on not solid, so that as soon as you pick up the knife and they all get attached to the knife and effectively you don't get stuck inside the cannons and you can still walk around. The method I've used, you can use like laser or beam or whatever, but I just found this more efficient and controllable, and it was a little more stable and actually worked for me. So you've got a trigger hurt, which is basically a brush, and you can put that in using the brush over here. Set it to the size you want, and then again bring up your properties and assign whatever amount of damage you want. So this time we're going to need to give it a name because we want the button to activate it, and I've just called it hurt, and the parent again is knife. And start disabled you want as yes, so that it's not constantly causing damage if you stand inside the trigger area. Damage and damage cap I've set both to 5,000. You don't necessarily need to mess with the damage cap, but it's a guarantee that it's always going to do it basically. And 0 damage force, I've turned it on to yes. I don't know whether it makes much difference, but it can give sort of a physics push to the player when they get hit, so it makes them sort of fly as if they've been hit by a cannonball. And the EMV explosion, obviously again you're going to need to give it a name. I just call it EXP explosion, and parent as knife, and the magnitude is 0 because you don't want it to cause any damage because it'll be hurting you as well. And the flags are quite important here. Have everything off except no damage, repeatable, no smoke, no decal, which means it doesn't leave a scorch mark on the floor, again just for efficiency. No sparks, because cannons don't spark. No sound, because I put that in manually after. I'll just give you a run through on that in a second. And no D lights, which is no dynamic lights, which is again just for efficiency. Okay. And down here we've got our property of an ambient generic, which is basically allowing us to put our own sound in whenever we want it to fire the cannon. I've just called it bang, my brilliant naming conventions. And sound name is explode_1, and the source entity name, which is the important one because we want it to actually sound like the cannons have fired, not you press a button and the sound originates from where this entity is here. Because we can't actually parent this entity, we want the entity name to be the explosion here because it's in the right place. So what you can do, you can click the little target thing here and assign it to your EMV explosion, which means whenever this is told to produce the explosion sound, it creates. And as I missed it a moment ago, just leave the game player equip completely empty, which will in effect leave your inventory completely empty, allowing you to pick up the knife. So what I'm going to do now is head over to the button and give you the run through on that. I've spoke about those, so we're going to go to the Outputs tab here, and basically this is coding everything up in a sense, but just with all your UI here. So go to output named on pressed, which means whenever you press the button, and all your things are going to start happening. So I'll just run through on what I've got here. On pressed, exp, which is your explosion entity over there, is going to do the output of explode, which means you'll get the effect of the flash of an explosion, and as we've told it not to hurt anything, it won't do any damage, you'll just see an explosion. On pressed hurt, we're going to enable, which is our trigger here, and that will be enabled straight away as soon as you press the button, and at the same time the ambient generic sound entity will play its sound and you'll hear the explosion. And very last, we've got to disable this because we don't want it on permanently. So on pressed, hurt is now disabled instead of enabled, and that does it in a delay of 0.2 seconds. So when we press the button, the explosion creates the explosion, the sound creates our custom sound instead of the boring normal one there, and the trigger is enabled for 0.2 of a second, so if you're inside the trigger, like say our counter-terrorist over here will be, for that 0.2 of a second, he's going to receive the full 5,000 damage. And if anyone else goes into the trigger after that, as it's been disabled, they're not going to get injured. So I'll now show you the result in game.